Hey everyone, what's up? How's it going? This is Finite MTG, and it's been a while, but we are back. I'm about to graduate from undergrad, so I've been dealing with finals, worrying about grad school, that kind of thing. And yeah, finally back to bring you all some more content. So this time we're going to be going over a chaos draft. You might notice things look a little different from normal in this one though, and that's because this is a total chaos draft. This is something that I set up using the MTGA draft.tk site, a site that is marketed toward arena use. Marketed, I say, but it's free to use. And really, you can use it for anything, obviously, as plenty of these cards are not on arena. And so it actually works perfectly for hosting these chaos drafts. So I'll put some info about that in the description. And just one more tidbit. I've started a Patreon. I did mention grad school just now. Obviously, no pressure for anyone to contribute to that or not, but would definitely appreciate it just because right now it's not always the easiest financially to be a student. So, with that out of the way, let's dive into this chaos draft. We're going to be going over not just the draft, but also the matches. And yeah, hopefully the thumbnail didn't give too much away. Okay, so pack one, pick one here. We've got kind of an interesting one. Some decent uncommons for sure, but the main cards I'm considering are the Spike Tiller and the Burn Trail. And Burn Trail is a very good card, so it's a little bit unclear maybe that the two creatures can't just share a color with each other. They have to share a color with the card you're conspiring, so in this case that's Burn Trail. But still, it's not very difficult to pull off, and it's just so powerful when you do. I know how good that card is. I've played with it. Spike Tiller is not a card I've played with before, and I thought they were pretty comparable. Spike Tiller is obviously pretty slow. Starts off as 5 mana 3/3, but you're eventually able to turn it into 3/3s. Yes, it does turn the lands into creatures, and technically they're more vulnerable, but I do think that this thing has a higher ceiling than the Burn Trail. That said, I think Burn Trail was probably the correct pick, but I ended up going with the Spike Tiller just because I'd never played with it and wanted to see how it would do. Alright, second pick here. So we've definitely got some strong cards in the pack. We did just take a green card, so we could take Rada and it wouldn't be totally crazy. Could get our 5 mana 3/3 online a little earlier. It's just kind of a neat card too. There's also Pyroclasm, which could be a really good follow-up if we're trying to go for some kind of red strategy with that Conspire Burn spell. Otherwise, Painful Lesson is fine, Talisman is okay too, Prying Eyes and Skirmisher are kind of nice, but Tomb Hex is just really good no matter what. Kind of surprised to see it still in the pack. I think it's relatively close to Pyroclasm, but I think Tomb Hex is just a lot better for Chaos Draft, so that's what I ended up going with. Alright, now we see this pack, and this pack has not a lot going on. Most of these cards are pretty weak. There are some playable ones to be sure, like Goblin Shortcutter's fine. If we'd taken the red cards, I mean, it's better than like a Grinning Ignis, right? This thing is not a May, just watch out for that, but it can be good in the right situation, as long as you're not blowing up your own enchantment. So actually here I ended up going with this On-Crop Champion. I already had a green card right from the Spike Tiller, and 4 mana 4/4 is a really good rate. I don't love taking gold cards super early, but this pack just has so little that I'm fine. I think the opportunity cost is low, passing the rest of this pack. Okay, now things start to get really interesting, because pack 1, pick 4, we still have a rare in the pack, and it's a pretty good one. Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. So 2 and triple blue for 3/4 flash that gives creatures you own that aren't on the battlefield flash. And puts your opponent into Teferi Time Raveler mode, where they they can't play at instant speed. And so yeah, this card is obviously pretty powerful, but trying to think logistically about how it would work in my deck, it's clear that this is a blue signal. There's a lot of blue just in this card itself, and the fact that it's here means that blue is probably open. That said, at this point, I really haven't had a clear idea of which colors I should or shouldn't be in. And 5 mana for a 3/4 flash isn't a stellar body. So even though the card itself is very powerful, you can shut down other tricks like Neck Snap becomes completely uncastable for your opponent. Leave in the Dust gets a lot worse, that kind of thing. And it does allow your other creatures to play really trickily too. I just think that this card, even though it's strong, just isn't super likely to make my deck because the mana cost is so difficult and so intensive. And basically, I'm already trying to hedge into green-white with the on-crop champion, and I can play the Neck Snap more easily, no matter what. I can play it if I go blue-white, I can play it if I go green-white. So this was a pick that I really wasn't sure about at the time. Definitely would understand people taking Teferi here, but I'm just going to say with hindsight, I do feel really good about this one. Alright, next one here, and this is kind of what I foreshadowed with saying I can play blue-white with the Neck Snap, because here we get a Lawmage's Binding. This is another pretty weak pack. There's just not very much going on. Got some big power boosts here, I suppose, but pretty clunky cards overall. Infantry Veteran would be something that we'd be interested in wheeling if this pack had playables. This pack doesn't really have playables, so we're not going to wheel it. Okay. And then next up here, we are reluctantly kind of going into blue here, so we do have to take a blue card. There is Rise and Fall in the pack, but it just seems a little far away from what we're trying to do. So take Inventory, not exactly a card designed for Chaos Draft, and Sleight of Hand is just going to be a great card basically whenever you can play it, unless there are better cantrips available in a constructed format or something. I mean, it's just a really, really solid card. Not quite as good here as in Cube or something similar, but definitely a good addition to our deck. Alright, next up. So we have some pretty nice black cards. Mind Rot is fine. Servant of Neferox is kind of cool. Exalted is a neat ability. And then Soul Salvage is just like a really nice value card. But we're kind of sticking to our blue-white guns at this point as we get a Teremco Griffin. So 3 and a white for a 2/2 banding with flying. And banding is just one of those abilities where once you learn how it works, it just becomes so much more fun because you get to play it against people who primarily don't and then just do silly things. Alright, next up here, pretty good blue-white pack for us. Gonna ignore this Patra and just assume there's no one in green-black. So we see Akami of Ancient Law would be a totally fine bear. Bear's looking pretty good in this format based on the number of unplayables there are. Farsight Adept, even better than the Kami of Ancient Law, I think. Really a tempting choice for me. As anyone who knows me well knows, I do love a 3-mana 3/3. But Metropolis Sprite is just a little too good for what we're trying to assemble here. Just the fact that it can be, a cheap evasive threat with 2 power. That's really something we're looking for, just always in Limited, but especially Chaos Draft. Alright, next up here, see a nice card from my Pauper combo cube that I'm working on. Hopefully with the release of Modern Horizons 2, I'll be able to finish that cube up soon. We'll see. Got a Disempower here, which is kind of a neat disenchant effect. It does say on top instead of bottom though, so it's more like a memory lapse, I guess. And then here we have a Vigilant Drake, which again, 5 mana, 3/3 flyer, and it doesn't have Vigilance, ironically, but you can untap it, so it's as if it's Vigilant. This card is totally solid. 5 mana, 3/3 flyer is a pretty reasonable rate. We're happy to get it here. Alright, next up, pack 1, pick 10, we get this Talisman of Progress. And this is very surprising. The first pack was definitely good, and fixing is really, really easy, and ramp. They're both really easy to overrate in formats like Chaos, because a lot of the time you just don't end up playing things like that. Like sometimes lands are just better cards. But we already have like a pretty high number of 4 and 5 drops. We just picked up another one. This is double on color fixing for us, and blue-white is frankly a premier color combination in Chaos Draft. So yeah, very surprised to see this here and not going to complain. Alright, next up here, I believe I took Uncomfortable Chill out of spite over the Aven Cloud Chaser. I think this thing could be fine, but I was thinking about the fact that I have Lawmage's Binding in my deck. I guess if I did want to sideboard this in, I could bring Binding out, but then that feels pretty bad too. I just don't think I'm very likely to want to play this card in general. 4 mana 2/2 flyer with like potential downside and maybe pretty good upside. But Uncomfortable Chill is just a nice anti-aggro card. And then here we are, we have Banalish Honor Guard versus Leapfrog, pack 1, pick 12. So earlier I mentioned that Kami of Ancient Law would be a really nice bear, because it is, I mean, a bear with upside, and technically this one is too, but we already passed the Teferi, so how many legends are we getting realistically? Probably not a lot. That said, Leapfrog is very fragile. I ended up taking it, but I could see taking the Honor Guard here too and having that potentially be better. And here I took Spell Pierce, took another counter spell here with Vex, and then pack 1, pick 15, we got a decently playable card here in Jur's Renunciation. The cycling really pushes it the rest of the way to being playable. And pack 2, pick 1 here, we have some powerful cards for sure. Acidic Slime in the pack, Mystical Teachings is a super fun one, Goblin Boom Keg, not the strongest card ever, but kind of a fun one. Nice flavor. Lightning Blast in the pack as well. But we're not really doing too much here other than picking like a Rewind or a Pressure Point unless we take this Boom Pile. So yeah, that's one of the kind of funnier things about doing one of these total Chaos drafts. You definitely get some wacky cards. You can see the Magic Online prizes set symbol on here. So not a card you're going to play with in your typical Chaos drafts, but definitely a spicy and interesting one. Shake things up a bit for sure. Alright, next pack here, and this is a card I know a little about from flashbacks in the past. So Safe Passage looks like a lot of cards that are pretty unplayable. There are a lot of fog effects that cost 2 or 3, and they're just pretty bad. But it's really important to note that this does not say combat damage, which means it also works against burn spells, things like fireballs. It's just such a good and versatile effect. And there's even another type of card I didn't mention that it works against, which I will I will cover in the matches. Alright, now next up here, still passing some very good cards not in our colors. Krosan Tusker this time, and a Rift Bolt. Pretty painful stuff. But we still get a Cloud Elemental here. Really nicely costed card, not a great blocker, but just a good threat. Speaking of blockers, we would love to wield this Territorial Rock. Doesn't seem very likely, given, again, these packs on average seem to have a pretty low number of playables, but still hoping that the Rock comes back. Oh, and then Sunclasp. This is not Conviction. Conviction returns the enchantment, Sunclasp returns the creature, so just make sure you don't mix those up. Alright, and now here we have two premium cards for us as well. Mirror Incubator and Crown of Empires. No, just kidding. Guided Strike and Windrake. So Guided Strike is a great combat trick, but I feel like combat tricks matter more when you're actually being blocked, and why would I allow my creatures to be blocked when I could just have them all have flying? So yeah, Windrake, nothing super special. I think Guided Strike is probably a better card actually, but I think Windrake is more of what this deck is looking for. Just kind of some redundancy with that Cloud Elemental. Alright, next up here, pretty powerful card in Death Reap Ritual. Maybe the Hapatra player can pick that up. I don't really know how that's looking for someone. For us, there's not a lot going on. Pretty medium sideboard card, but I'd rather bring this in than the 4-mana 2/2 flyer, I think. And then we have Spell Blast over here, which is a counterspell. It's not an amazing counterspell, but because, you know, there's going to be mana disadvantage associated with it, it's going to be kind of tough to play it, especially in the early game, I think. But did end up taking it here just because the pack is pretty thin for us. Alright, then here we have kind of an interesting pick. So strategic planning, a nice form of card filtering. I talked about Sleight of Hand earlier, and that's definitely a card I enjoy. We have Doorkeeper here. Not a stellar card in general, in my opinion, but it is something we'd be looking for in terms of just being able to hold off the ground while we attack repeatedly in the air. Not a fan of 1/1 flyers and putting them in my deck, but a 1/1 flying old lifelink is going to be just better enough, I think, to be happy to run it, even for 2 mana. So even though the other cards, I think, look a little more powerful if you're used to playing with them, maybe, I think the Morning Thrall is actually a really solid choice for our deck, and our curve too. Alright, so here we have a Battlefield Forge. If we wanted to splash red, could see that being the case if we did pack one, pick one, that Conspire burn spell, but as it was, I was pretty happy here to pick up an Inquisitor's Ox. It's not super likely that I will be turning on Delirium. Delirium is one of those things that's pretty hard to put together, like Threshold, unless you really have a specific set of cards. But just 4 mana 2/5 is a rock solid body, and I would much rather put an Inquisitor's Ox into my deck than a Doorkeeper. So happy with that one. Alright, then here we have another pretty interesting pick. So we got a very late, what is it, Talisman of Progress, the Azorius one in pack 1, and now we're seeing a Marble Diamond and a Heraldic Banner. And we get to choose which color we want to tap this banner for, / which color of creatures we want to pump. And last time I did one of these drafts, I alluded to this a little earlier. I was just very disappointed with the ramp cards in my deck. And it's not because it's bad to ramp, right? Like, it's pretty rare that it's bad to ramp, but it's just easy to overvalue ramp when games come down to top decking. Because if you're putting ramp cards in your deck, you're putting basically less gas in your deck. And so with less gas, you have fewer cards that are live draws and things like that. So not sure that I would play either of these cards, but the banner is closer to a live draw, so that's what I went with. Alright, and then here I believe we took the Rewind. I believe this counter is a lot better than Spell Blast or whatever we took earlier. Pressure Point is interesting, especially for kind of a tempo-oriented deck like ours appears to be, but I think Rewind is just a more impactful sideboard card. Not interested in the Fairy Mechanist. And then here I think I took Pieces of the Puzzle. This is one of those cards that's great and constructed, like Pauper for instance, but just not really good in limited, kind of like Augur of Bolas, where it's just too difficult to make your deck contain what you want to. That said, I still felt like I had a higher chance of being able to use that than Odalian Merchant or Brain Freeze. Next here, we took that Sun Clasp, remember, not Conviction. And here I think we took Dark Inquiry, though I might have taken Mirror Incubator. It doesn't really matter at this point because these cards don't really do anything. Here we wield a nice sideboard card in the Patrician Scorn. And here this thing is pretty bad, so I took this Wall that's a pretty decent blocker and eventually becomes a pretty scary attacker too. And yeah, got some nice mono black cards here, I guess, if we wanted to pivot. Spicy old stuff for sure. Alright, and now we definitely have a pretty painful pack in front of us. So we have Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, which is super sweet, though I don't think it's very good at all. 8 mana for a 7/6 trample, and that's pretty much the relevant part of it. Just almost like a worse Colossal Dreadmaw, I want to say. It's definitely not like a Carnage Tyrant. The mana abilities are cute, but this isn't really something I want to put in my deck. Guiltleaf Winnoware, on the other hand, this card is amazing. I believe this was a rare in like Magic Origins and then got downshifted to uncommon in Commander Legends. That's how we have them both here. I don't think that there's one foil. But yeah, this card is very powerful. Really wish I could take it, but happy enough, I'll say, with the Soltari Trooper. Just another good 2-drop, 2 mana, 2/2 unblockable. Pretty sad, again, to pass cards that are so much stronger. We have kind of a Tormenting Voice effect here in Latnom's Legacy, and Stormrider Spirit would be a good one for our deck as well. But the Trooper is what I decided to go with. Alright, and then things get really, really insane for us here. Another excellent pack. So Precog Field is probably a bit too narrow, even though it is a really cool card. If you played a lot of Dominaria Limited, you probably know you can do some sweet things with that card. Caught in the Brights, totally solid. Pacifism effect. Windrake, I mean, we already liked the first one, right? So we would like the second, of course. Raven's Familiar is a nice, slow kind of value card. I believe it's 3 mana, 1/2 flyer for an Anticipate, basically, and then once you pay the Echo, then you really get to keep the 1/2 flyer. Marshalling Cry is a nice combination of keywords added together, but of course you all know that we are taking the Mother of Runes here, and it's not remotely close. This is a card that I feel like, in general, you probably want to hate draft, but it's difficult when there's another card that's pretty similar in power level. And you want to hate draft specifically in this format because we're playing in pod, and this card will get you. So there's definitely some more reason to do that than usual in the way we're playing. And then we just get the perfect card for our deck here in Empyrean Eagle, literally made for the archetype we're drafting. Same colors, has flying itself, good stats itself, and it pumps our flyers. That's perfect. So not going to have to think very hard about that one. Alright, next up here we have another very powerful pack. Ended up going with the Saltfield Recluse over the Aven Trailblazer, hoping that maybe there's a chance it wheels, or maybe we even wheel this thing and could consider playing it. I don't like Pongify very much. Sentinel could be interesting. Not sure if I have anything that's particularly good with it, but Recluse is just always a beating. Alright, and then next up here we have a pretty good pack. Another 3 or 4 cards that we'd be really happy to put in our deck. Fiendbinder is okay. I really like it in aggressive decks in general, but the fact that it has 2 toughness and that most of our creatures attack in the air anyway means it's a little more awkward for us than we'd like it to be. Inspiration is a card I really like in Chaos Draft, just like Divination, but plays better with counterspells. Hyena Umbra is a great Voltron card, if you will, just a good card for protecting things. But Stormplate Aerialist is really, really nice, fits our game plan well. We can have things where we go turn 1 Mom, and then the rare attack with Mother of Runes, then turn to Stormfleet Aerialist and just close out the game very early. Alright, and then here we have another pretty easy pick. Get this card, which I've never played with before, Banalish Heralds. 3 and a white for a 2/4, which for 3 and a blue taps to draw a card. So we definitely found which colors we're supposed to be in, which is a great feeling because we have passed so many good black cards. Here's another one. Alright, and yeah, now pretty clear-cut pick here with a core Skyfisher in the pack. This card is a really sweet synergistic card, does cool things in Pauper. Probably not going to be the most synergistic in our deck, but the rate is just so good that it doesn't really matter. And yeah, there's usually something you can return to your hand that you don't mind too much. Alright, then next up here we have a bunch of white cards that are playable or playable-ish. Day Squad Marshal has a pretty solid impact on the game. Our curve is a bit high, playing kind of a lot of 4s at this point, but the Day Squad is a really nice one, a lot better than any of the other 3 white cards in my opinion, so that's what we took. And now we have a really interesting pick here, pack 3, pick 9. So Latnom's Legacy, definitely a card I would consider main decking, just as a flood inhibitor. Really not a bad card, it's just that blue normally gets cards a lot better than this, so it's easy to think of it as not very impressive. And then here we have Circle of Protection Green, which definitely is not a card we're going to main deck. If it were a Rune of Protection, I could see main decking it. But I do think that this card potentially has some crazy potential to just completely lock an opponent out of a game, which is something I'm interested in. So, especially against, say, like the person taking that green Praetor. So, yeah. Alright, and then here we are with another really difficult pick, pack 3, pick 10. Ended up going with Raven's Familiar here. And Precog Field, not amazing in our deck. We don't quite have enough spells to really take advantage of it. But it's still a powerful engine of card advantage and tempting one, maybe if our deck was a little slower. But pretty happy with Raven's Familiar for our blue-white Flyers deck. Right, and then here we have Worthy Cause, which is pretty terrible. I believe I took Chandra's Fury out of this pack. It's technically a hate draft, but I mean, this card is just more playable than anything else going on here. And then I believe I took Tolarian Sentinel here, just trusting that no one was in blue-red and that I wasn't handing anyone a pretty solid card so late. Though I could see this being wrong just because Sentinel is not very likely to make my deck, and if I lose to this card or just play against it in general, I'm going to definitely be kicking myself. And then here we have Venerable Monk, which is a Grey Ogre with upside, not normally where you want to be, but the 2 life is decent, and it looks like we might be taking some damage early, so I do like the Monk a decent amount here. Alright, and then here we have Dream Twist, which is just an absolutely unplayable card, and Ether Plasm, which is also very unplayable, but it's kind of funny, and it's more likely that I would consider playing this in some universe, I feel like, than Dream Twist, so I took that. And then here we have Lash of Thorns. Alright, so this is how I ended up building the deck, and it's really, really strong. The curve is better than I thought. Fewer 5-drops, and we do have the Talisman to accelerate us too if we need that, or just fix our mana. Note that the Teferi technically could have made our deck, but I think we're playing, what, 3? Yeah, we're playing 7 islands and the Talisman, so we could have put Teferi in our deck, maybe gone a little bit of a different direction in this draft, but I do think not putting a strain on the mana was a nice choice for us. We do have the Boom Pile in the main as well, even though we are playing a pretty aggressive deck, just because I feel like people kind of overstate how Wraths are bad when you're playing aggressive decks. particularly because this is not a cube, right? I'm not playing mono red or mono white aggro where I'm going to be the aggressor a very high percentage of the time. I'm going to be the aggressor a lot with this deck, but for the times that I'm not, this is still a mid-range deck. Boom Pile is going to be useful. Alright, here we are back for round number 1, game 1, and we have the Curve of Dreams, Mom into Stormfleet Aerialist. So pretty happy about that. Opponent leads on planes into planes. So they could have something to get us here. There are definitely some white cards that can blow up a tapped creature, things like that. We don't know what other color they're playing either, but we are giving them a 1-turn window to answer this Mom. Opponent has an Ivory Giant suspended, and they do have a Mountain, which could have killed the Mom, but nothing to kill the Mom with. And so that means we are pretty much set at this point. So we get to drop the Empyrean Eagle, which just continues to make the curve insane. I mean, this is just the nut draw. And we have the Mom up now. Opponent has a Lodestone Golem, which is a pretty powerful card. Going to be annoying for us because we can't give protection from it, and it's going to be a little tricky to race. We also can't cast our 4-drops here. We have to cast Sleight of Hand, and we find an island over the Boom Pile. Decided that it looks like I'm going to be the aggressor this game. Don't think I'm very interested in a Boom Pile, even though that land isn't super valuable. And I decide not to attack with the Stormfleet because I'm planning on trading it off for the Lodestone. Things can go wrong here if they have a combat trick for sure, just because, again, can't really give protection, but not too worried about that. Just want to make sure I don't take 5 damage in too many chunks, and really, really importantly here, I can't get 2 for 1. They can't kill my Empyrean Eagle, unless they have like Ghostfire or something, and then shrink my 3/4 flyer. So that's a good exchange for me, for sure. And now we get to attack for 2. And how about 5 mana 4/4 flyer? Pretty good. Not quite a Sarah Angel, but it's pretty close. And nice attack for 6 in here. And here, I think this is probably wrong, but it's not super clear either way. I decided to play a tiny bit scared around a Wrath because I figured that I was virtually winning no matter what here. There's also some value in just not giving my opponent a little more information, but at the end of the day, I don't think this kind of decision makes a huge difference, and I think you are just supposed to run out like the Inquisitor's Ox. Alright, and we are back for game 2 here. Got a pretty risky hand with this Island Sleight of Hand. We do have some good things to do with it if we're able to find the planes. And I ended up throwing that one back. And yeah, ended up keeping this one. Opponent plays Soulmender. Or just dropping a planes. Really wish we drew an island instead of another planes, but well, second try, still pretty good. Opponent has a gold mirror as well, so not the most intimidating creature ever, but they can accelerate, which is good for them for sure. And now, yeah, they are able to crack in. Kind of interesting that they gained a life instead of attacking earlier. Might have been a misclick, not really sure. So here we get to play the Windrake, which we're going to try to use to trade with the Aven Trailblazer, or we can use the Safe Passage if we want to do that too. They have Goblin Shortcutter here, which is a really great card in this spot. Allows them to put another threat onto the battlefield and get in a bunch of damage. So really strong showing for that card. And this is one of those spots where Boom Pile would be excellent, by the way. So here I just pass. My plan again is to use the Safe Passage. That's going to allow me to keep my Windrake and kill my opponents. And it's also going to effectively gain me 4 life because it will prevent the damage that will be dealt to me as well. So seems like a good rate for one card, and the opponent Do they have the sick read? No, unfortunately they just passed through their turn. I have had a couple sick reads before in Chaos Draft. I remember the Channel Harm one pretty well, where even though it's a card you haven't seen in like the matches yet, or in the games yet, and it's Magic's entire history, sometimes just tapping or playing a certain way is so indicative. Maybe they thought like Settle the Wreckage was coming. I don't know. But here they go for an attack all, as they would have last turn. And they go for an outflank here, and that's just so unlucky for them because, again, as I alluded to previously, Safe Passage works against burn spells just as a kind of one-sided fog, and it works as one other kind of counter as well, and it's to these Gideon's Reproach type of effects. And so this is just a perfect opportunity for me to Safe Passage here, gain that 4 life, counter that outflank, and still kill that Aven Trailblazer. So yeah, obviously very happy about how things went here. Note that not sure the opponent has a huge incentive not to use the outflank. Depends like what's in their hand and whether they think they can win if they trade the Windrakes. I mean, obviously I did not want to trade my Windrake, but they do wreck me there if they just wait for me to play the Safe Passage. Alright, and now here we have Metropolis Sprite, which is going to be able to block some 1/1s. And we have Venerable Monk, which is going to gain some life and try to stabilize the ground. The Windrake is able to come in the air, as we have, again, the 1/1s locked up, and the Monk is able to trade for the Shortcutter. Opponent has Lodestone Golem again. Going to make the trade that we mentioned, and now next now costs 5 mana because of Lodestone Golem, which means we are not doing anything like activating the Metropolis Sprite for sure. So still happy to keep that back against the 1/1s, and hopefully we can get a nice clean kill on this Lodestone Golem, and we do. Opponent has Fiendbinder. Pretty powerful card, good in their deck for sure. Cards like that Shortcutter. So we probably could have made a little bit more of an aggressive attack here, but I'm still a bit afraid because they have Fiendbinder now that they could have some pretty powerful stuff in terms of pushing damage through. So just wanted to make it so be a tiny bit harder for them to attack. Like they can attack with the Fiendbinder here, right? Tapping down our 2/3 flyer that can block it, but our 1/2 still holds back 2 damage, so I think it's decent. And that is exactly what happens here. And yeah, just had super nice mana efficiency the entire time. Carelessly playing stuff out pre-combat. And here I'm trying to decide which creature to leave back, whether I want to leave back the Stormfleet Aerialist or the Windrake, if, say, the 2/4 is getting tapped so that 3/2 can make another attack. And I decide here that I want to leave back the 2/3 to trade with the Fiendbinder, because even though it's a better creature, it means that 2/1 over there is not attacking, which it would be able to do into the Windrake. So sort of trading a better creature to gain some life here, if you will. And they have the 4 mana 2/2 flyer. And yeah, make the plays that we described earlier. Now we just get to go for a huge attack because we're pretty commandingly in the lead. Really the only thing the opponent can do here is gaining increments of 1 life, which we're not really too worried about. Decide to leave the 2/4 at home because it's still holding back a bunch of damage. But we're not even really interested in drawing a card here. So here I was going to pump that anyway, so probably a good choice for them to put that in front of it, but they didn't know I was going to pump it anyway. So, and then here we just run out the Day Squad Marshal, immediately acting like there's no way that they would have a Wrath in their deck. But obviously, if I'm playing Boom Pile in mine, they can have a Wrath in theirs. Opponent gains a bunch of life back up to 9, and looks like, yeah, that is it. Alright, back for round number 2 now. And get a pretty decent hand. 2 lands of each color is kind of nice. Boom Pile could be potentially pretty awkward, but I have faith in my ability to draw spells at some point. I have not drawn any spells yet, and so I have a couple options in this spot, and I think my choice was probably incorrect here, but I also think I made it for reasons that made sense. So I decided that just because my opponent seemed like they were playing a slower, more controlling deck, that Saltfield Recluse wouldn't be super impactful here if I played it turn 3. It seemed like it would probably eat like an Essence Scatter or something similar to that. So I decided to make this horribly mana inefficient play, which I do think is kind of reasonable, but just wrong in a vacuum of pumping the Sprite. There should be a Saltfield Recluse in play here. And now opponent plays a Servant of Nephrox and just instantly punishes me, which again is deserved. Here I attack with my Flyer, which again, not going to block with that. If the Servant attacks, it attacks as a 4/2, which means it can trade for half of my, well, 3/4 of my Day Squad Marshal. And then they have Seer's Lantern pass, so I'm definitely happy that they are passing. Get to attack with the 1/1 pretty freely, because the 1/1's not going to be able to block, and they're never making this trade. And I'm able to pump the Sprite again. So the damage is relevant. It's not like the play I made is just completely abysmal. Opponent has Select for Inspection on the Human Soldier, which is an interesting one for sure. I think it's probably an okay play, but it's not a very exciting one. And then here we have Saltfield Recluse coming down a little belated. And then they have Drag Under on the Saltfield Recluse, which we sort of played on ourselves by not casting it earlier. And then here, yeah, just replaying it, pumping and attacking, not offering the trade with the Day Squad Marshal because the Recluse takes that trade off the table, whether we're using it on the Servant on offense or defense. So opponent now attacks, which is pretty suspicious because they haven't been offering the trade either. And then they play a 0/6, which makes perfect sense. You don't have to worry about blocking with that thing anymore. But we're not too worried about a 0/6 with this deck. Sort of what our deck is designed to beat even. So opponent does have a removal spell on our Flyer, which is annoying. But we just draw another one, and even though we have pretty large number of lands drawn, and the opponent is scrying every turn, just the fact that we're drawing a relevant spell every now and then is pretty impactful. We're not really interested in using Boom Pile, by the way, even though there's a world I could imagine where we could be. And then here, now the opponent's down to 9 life, we get to play out a Winddrake. It just seems like they're going to die to some Flyers here. And they have 6 mana 5/5, unblockable, by the way. And that's a little bit annoying. I'm not really sure what else they could have that would be more problematic for me. This is probably a bad play. I'm probably supposed to hold Binding just for like a 3/3 flyer, like that kind of thing. But I still have the Saltfield Recluse against that, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to get rid of this 5/5 unblockable as the opponent was almost tapped out scrying here. And then, yeah, they're going to scry again, go for an Inspiration, so definitely some powerful cards from this opponent. And I believe there's a concession here, if the game isn't going to continue to play. Alright, well, there's at least an implied concession here, because the game ended in short order after this. Alright, here we have game 2 of round 2. Snap Mole, that first one, and the second one is much more reasonable, so I'm happy about that for sure. And we get the turn 1 Mom off the top, because we're drawing really well with this deck. Mulliganing probably more than you would expect to, but drawing really hot. So we go for the Windrake. Don't want to spend my turn 4 paying Echo instead of dropping the Heralds, so here I go for an attack with the Windrake. I'm definitely suspicious of my opponent just leaving that much mana up, but I go for a Banalish Heralds here, thinking that maybe they have a counter. I'm not really able to play around it very well. If they have a removal spell, I mean, I can play around that pretty well with the Mother, so. But they have one of the worst possible cards for me here in Bone to Ash. Just a huge beating, because Heralds is such a good card for me, and I mean, Bone to Ash is a 1-for-0 in response, so pretty nice. The opponent has a Mind Rot here, gets rid of a couple excess lands. Pretty happy that I can just get those out of the way. And then we get to Raven's Familiar for Law Mage's Binding. Get in for 2. Looks like we're just passing back here. And then paying Echo, because even though a 1-2 flyer is not the most impactful body, it is worth, 3 mana, 1-2 flying haste, if you will. That doesn't cost a card is pretty nice. So they make a 2-2 zombie here with Stir the Sands, which is definitely not what that card wants to do, but they are missing double black, so it makes perfect sense. And they have Necromancy now on the Banalish Heralds, which they can activate because they also have blue mana in their deck, so definitely a sweet twist there, but fortunately we do have that Law Mage's Binding, which I was thinking about main phasing, then I realized that they are almost definitely going to scry again end of turn, and we can just make the same play as last game with the Serpent. Opponent is not scrying in a turn, they're drawing 2 cards, and we can use this opportunity to bind up that Herald. So opponent bounces the Windrake to our hand, attacks with a zombie. We're taking the damage here because we don't want to block with Mom, give it pro black just to turn on any removal spells they have. It's worth paying 2 life a turn just to have a Mom in play, basically. Clock them for 1 here and have another nice mana efficient turn, dropping 2 powered flyers. Don't really want to put a Windrake on the zombie and try to eat it, even though it probably works out fine most of the time. It's just not something I'm really interested in. So here they have a Prying Eyes, which is another powerful form of card advantage. Their deck has a lot of that. And now they have a Cloud Form. Cloud Form is pretty annoying for me here because the Manifest is colorless, and just like the Lodestone Golem, that means Mother of Runes is not the most effective versus it. So I send the creatures that can attack into the Manifest. They trade with the Windrake, which makes perfect sense, and they had a land under there, which also makes perfect sense, and I drop my Flying Bandar here. Not Wily Bandar. And then here they attack with a zombie, and I think it's a great opportunity for me to show how messed up banding is, because normally in Magic you have to assign lethal damage with an attacker to one creature before assigning damage to the next. Works well with Death Touch, for instance. You can just assign 1 to each a bunch of times. But in this situation, banding lets me assign the damage that my opponent would deal, and I can just split that damage up 1 and 1 to my creatures with 2 toughness each, and yeah, they're going to need to have some kind of trick here, or they're just going to lose their zombie, because I have that Mother of Runes, and yeah. So banding claims another victim, and Harbor Serpent enters the battlefield. Here we have a nice attack for 5. Opponent down to 2 life, playing out the Soltari Trooper. A bunch of lethal threats at this point. It's going to be tough for the opponent. And this time, there's no concede bug. We can see the concession. And yeah, going on to round number 3. Alright, back for round number 3. We have a horrible hand, and I decided to keep this one because I do have, I think, 10 planes in the deck, not to mention that Talisman. And I also have Boom Pile, and I'm on the draw. And basically what that means is I'm more likely to hit my missing color than I normally would be. And even if I don't hit my missing color, even if I just hit an island, I can still just boom pile and just start activating that thing until until I win a flip. Opponent mulligans, and we just top deck the plains because this deck is just super smooth running. We ditched the boom pile here now that we have the plains, which probably was wrong, but we didn't know there was a land on top of our library, so that definitely makes it feel like a worse play. And here we get to just drop the Morning Thrall. Opponent does not want to trade their 2/1 flyer for my 1/1 lifelink, apparently. And I think I played, well, it looks like I changed my mind a few times, but ended up going with the banding creature, I guess, just to see if I can get more banding shenanigans to happen, and the opponent just scoops it up right there. I believe they revealed hand and were missing a bunch of colored mana, probably red mana at this point, so yeah, definitely can understand giving up against a Mother of Runes, even at this early stage in the game. Card's just very, very strong. Alright, back for game 2 of the finals. If we win this, we take it down. And we do have kind of an awkward hand here, 2 blue cards, no blue mana, but decide to keep it anyway, even with just the 8 blue sources in the deck, counting the talisman. Opponent now is on green mana after revealing hand with red cards to me last game, which is confusing. We did see some good black-green cards though in the draft, so it's potentially scary. Spineless Thug, not too problematic. And here we get an excellent draw in the Talisman of Progress. It's going to allow us to go Soltari Trooper this turn into attack, play Plains, play Talisman, Stormfleet Aerialist with Raid, using our exact amount of mana next turn. So just great draw for the sake of sequencing. Opponent has a very powerful card here. 3 mana 5/3 flyer, Avatar of Discord. And they are going to have to discard 2 cards. So we're still attacking here. Our shadow creature is not doing much blocking, kind of like their Spineless Thug. We draw another removal spell here in the next snap, which is definitely nice. Whoa. Alright. And now we get to, yeah, drop the Talisman and the Stormfleet Aerialist. We do take 1 damage for our troubles, but we are able to hold back that Spineless Thug now, which is pretty big game. 5/3 flyer crunches in. Definitely annoying. And then now we draw Island, and we're set up really nicely here to use Next Snap, and we want to use Next Snap specifically because we know that Lawmage's Binding is a more versatile removal spell in general, and that means that we'd rather get this Next Snap out of the way, especially if we can be mana efficient, which we can. Sleight of Hand first. Go with the Venerable Monk here just to try to gain some life, which I think is reasonable. Leaving the 2/3 flyer home, maybe it prevents the opponent from sending their Ghostly Changeling, but it definitely prevents them from sending that Spineless Thug, unless they have a Pump Spell or something, and if they do, then the next snap gets that much better. So we just go for the next snap here. We're going to take our beats. There's a world where I could imagine blocking the Stormfleet onto the Changeling, trying to elicit a pump from them, and then we sort of time walked them and killed a creature, but just felt like we were taking too much damage that way. Opponent has a 2/1 flyer, yet another card that doesn't line up well versus the Stormfleet Aerialists. Lots of 2/3 flyers doing work for me here. And then here we have, yeah, just Inquisitor's Ox, excellent blocker. It's going to prevent that Ghostly Changeling from coming in for any additional damage. Can even start attacking soon if we want to with that Inquisitor's Ox. And then not drawing anything particularly exciting, but we still have a good card in hand and a decent board state here. I think the Soltari Trooper attacked and not the Stormfleet. Oh, the Stormfleet did attack. Okay, so I was feeling a little frisky here. And I think my thought was, if they had like a combat trick or something with the Scavenging Harpy, I could use the Binding. And I was also just thinking about binding the Harpy anyway, because that's the creature that can get in damage right now. But I decided not to, try to play a little bit more disciplined, and let's see what they had here. Acorn Catapult, so another kind of zany commander card, like the Boom Pile. But this thing is pretty powerful. I've got a good number of X1s in my deck, including that Soltari Trooper. And this means that they're going to be able to trade them for 1/1 squirrels. They're also going to be able to deal damage to my face, and my life total is not super high here. So at this point I decided I needed to get as aggressive as I could be, so that Ghostly Changeling, I was just going to use that Lawmage's Binding right now. Now I have a nice attack for 8, and they can't block any of it, which, yeah, again, just sets me up so well. Even against 4 points of power from them and 1 damage ping, I'm not too worried about the bad things that can happen to me here, though I'm sure there are some. They have a Rift Bolt, so burn spell there. And this means that they are going to be able to survive, I believe. So they have that Acorn Catapult to get rid of my Soltari Trooper, and they can trade the Scavenging Harpy for the Venerable Monk, take 2 damage, and go to a lowly 1 life. Attack with the Spineless Thug, of course, as you always do. And then even though the Morning Thrall is going to get killed, it's important to remember to play it out here, because it doesn't just die, it leaves a squirrel behind when it goes, and that means, you know, even if I'm playing 2 mana 1/1 make a squirrel, that's still better than just not playing a card at all. So, like, I'm never getting the Acorn Catapult out of the way here, and the squirrel is a lethal threat now. So, opponent is in trouble. They have a Lightning Blast on my 2/5. So basically what they're showing me here is that I was very, very close to being dead. They had Rift Bolt earlier, which they had to use on one of my creatures, but Rift Bolt and Lightning Blast, right, that's 7 damage, and with that Catapult, it's just 8 right on its own. So if they had hit their land drops a little bit better, I definitely could have died here. But I feel like we navigated this game really well. Obviously the top of our library cooperated, but here I believe the opponent kind of cheekily targets himself with the Acorn Catapult, which, you know, I respect that. I've definitely done that kind of thing before. But yeah, that is it. That was our Chaos draft, and it was really awesome. Haven't been able to do one of these for a long time, because the Magic Online alt play calendar is not really cooperating. If any of you want to participate in these drafts, join my Discord. Just chime in and say, hey, I'd love to do a Chaos draft sometime, or when I'm planning one, just mention that you'd like to participate. And yeah, I mean, we're super open about all that. Always happy to have new people. And yeah, once again, that link to my Patreon will be in the description of the video. So thank you all for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this. I'm not sure what kind of Magic content I will be bringing you in the near future, but again, hope you liked this one. So, see you soon.